All right, we are live and we're recording. We've got all the things going. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday and welcome to our weekly Power Lounge. This is your place to hear authentic conversations from those who have power to share. My name is Amy Vaughan, and I am the owner and Chief Empowerment Officer of Together Digital, a diverse and collaborative community of women who work in digital and choose to share their knowledge, power, and connections. You can learn more about us and join the movement at www.togetherindigital.com. Today, in our latest episode, we are going to discover how you can amplify your unique style, leadership style specifically, unapologetically, to be your authentic self and refine what leadership means to you. Kari Ginsberg nerds out on supporting people through personal and organizational transformation. She is a trauma-informed professional certified coach through the International Coaching Federation and one of the first 500 recipients of the globally recognized Certified Change Management Professional Accreditation. Congrats, Kari. That's awesome.
Thank you.
As the HBIC, that's the head badass in charge. I love that we both that we're creative with our titles of the Uproar Coaching LLC. Kari supports women and femme leaders who want to spread out, get loud, and be boss bitches. In her free time, Kari enjoys anything true crime. I'm with you there, friend. Snuggling with her rescue dogs, which we've been discussing all as we've been prepping actually for today's recording. And she is losing the battle against the weeds in her garden. You know, Kari, we are in this together in so many ways, just based on your bio. I'm so excited to have you here. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I have been looking forward to this conversation all week. In fact, I so infrequently know what day of the week it is, but today I woke up and was like, it's Friday. It's Power Hour. Let's do it.
That is so fantastic. Well, I'm just as equally enthusiastic. Always it's good to come to Friday, but yeah, to always come and have an interesting and engaging conversation with passionate women like yourself. It's exactly why we keep doing this. So thanks for showing up, Kari.
Rad. Thanks for having me.
Share a little bit more about yourself, your journey from being a trauma-informed coach to becoming your HBIC, your head badass in charge at Uproar Coaching.
Yeah, thank you. Well, coaching has always been part of my leadership toolkit. I was an early leader in the federal space. I am formerly a federal employee. I have also worked in leadership roles in Fortune 500 companies. Early in my career, I was a teacher, so I was leading a classroom for high school students, all of those things. But coaching has always been something that's been really, really important to me, supporting people as they discover within themselves the ways to get the things that they want. I was coaching as like an actual side hustle for many, many years. Just, like people would say, like, I need support. Have you talked to Kari? That was at work. I need support. Have you talked to Kari? These were friends outside of work connecting me with strangers or other people in their communities or their network, their circle. It wasn't until early days of the pandemic when my team within a Fortune 500 company we underwent an organizational realignment. It was very poorly handled, which is never great, never feels good as a person who's impacted by change that way, knowing that things could have been better. But we were realigned under a very toxic leader. And for several months, I tried to protect my team. I tried to protect the relationships that we had established. I was doing a lot of self-coaching at that time and still coaching on the side. But because it was the pandemic, all of the extracurriculars that I had that were really nourishing my soul went away. And so I was working for a bad leader, and then I was coaching. And I was miserable in my day job. And I was finding a lot of joy in my coaching. And I came downstairs one day after a particularly hard day, and I said to my husband, I'm really unhappy. And he was like, I know. Okay.
You're like, oh, it's
hiding it. Huh? Yeah. Yeah. And I said, and I would like to make a change. And he said, I know. And I said, and I think I can go out and do this coaching thing and do it full time. And he like figuratively swept everything off the dining room table. We got our laptops, we set everything up and figured out a way to make it work. And so in June 2020, Uproar Coaching came to be. And by November 2020, I had left my full-time job and went full-time. Well, I left my full-time corporate job and went full-time into Uproar and never looked back. And I love that you are the Chief Empowerment Officer. I do appreciate also that the two of us have found fun in creating our own titles. And I think that as business owners, we have the flexibility to do that. But I also think if you were a leader within an organization, there's a way to come up with like a working title that feels true to what it is that you were doing in the day to day that maybe sets you apart from the corporate structure and also reflects who you are as a leader and what you are bringing that is different from your peers.
I agree with you from an entrepreneurial perspective. That was one of the first things I did as soon as I bought the company was like, oh, I'm changing my title. I still want to be CEO. That's still my role. That's what I do. But it really stands for more than an executive. And, funny story, I used to, when I was still working in agencies, I would so often play the role of so many. I was a creative copywriter, eventually creative director, but long before I was even officially promoted and given the salary of a creative director, I was often introduced on the phone to clients as an associate creative director or a creative director so that they could kind of bolster the validation of who was on the phone. And so some of my coworkers probably who listen to this podcast remember this because some of them have even sent me some of my old emails with my signature. I used to just mess with people and change my signature to just random ass things from time to time because I was just like, what does a title even mean? So I was like a penguin choreographer one day. I was a centipede shoe shine technician another day. Time people didn't even read it or notice. And I just really wanted to prove the point that, titles, I get why we have them, but that doesn't necessarily distinguish, everything that we do and all that we are. So as soon as I came into the role of owner of digital, I was like, yeah, I'm changing my title. So I relate to that a whole lot. And I just, again, have this whole philosophy and idea of titles. I think, like I said, they're important from a understanding function and purpose in the sense of what those that you serve. It doesn't implicate value, in my opinion, per se.
I absolutely love everything about that. This is going to be an amazing conversation. Let's keep going.
Yeah. And I also want to give kudos to your husband. I had a very similar moment where he looked at me and says, you're buying this company. You need good support. Again, it doesn't have to be a spouse.
No.
But you need to find when if any of you that are listening are interested in going out on your own for that very scary leap of that entrepreneurial journey, you do need those kind of people who are going to just push everything else aside for a minute and sit down with you and help you figure it out. It's really hard to do it alone otherwise. So I love you sharing that story. And again, like kudos to your partner. It sounds amazing.
He's great. Yeah. Most days he's great.
Most days, I know, right?
That was a good day. That was a banner day, right? But it's funny because I mean, he's been very supportive across this whole journey. As you know, there's a lot of highs and heartbreak when you are a business owner. But finding the right people along the journey to support you at those different moments too has been really important. I've had so many really interesting relationships just because of this leap. So yeah.
So specifically, what inspired you to specialize in supporting women and femme leaders in their personal and professional transformations?
Well, I found that particularly when I first started in leadership, which is when I was in my mid to late 20s, not only was I one of the youngest people around the board table, but I often was the youngest female around the table and one of very few females in the room. And it made me really question why there weren't more women in leadership and why there was that gender disparity. And I remember reading in, I don't know, it might have been 2019, early 2020, a Harvard Business Review article about women who were starting their countries and women who had companies, women who were starting their companies and women who were assuming leadership roles, and how within their first 3 years, they either continued to ascend or they continued to really stabilize and grow their business, or they folded up shop and left. They quit their job, they found something else. And I found that really heartbreaking. And it was something like 67% of women who were just launching were folding up and taking their ball home. And I really dislike that. And some of the reasons that were brought forward in that article is because so often in these rooms, yes, women are given a seat at the table, but they aren't given full permission at the table, right? They still have to speak very quickly or quietly or not at all. So they have to be quiet. Or they literally have to take up as little space as possible, either with their ideas or even like physically sitting in the room.
Yep.
Um, and they don't have the authority. They have to demur. I can't tell you how many times I was in a room where I was sitting at a table with my peers and I was expected to take notes. And it
Yep.
wasn't even like, hey, can somebody take notes today? And then nobody volunteered. So I raised my hand. It was like, and Kari, can you take notes? And it's like, am I taking notes because I have the best handwriting? No, I have
Right.
terrible lefty backslant and I'm not going to type. Am I taking notes because I'm the best note taker? Absolutely not. You just assumed that because I'm a female, I'm going to secretary this moment.
Yep.
And that made me really mad. And it just felt like it was patriarchal bullshit.
Yep.
And I believe that women and femme leaders, particularly those of us who are a little non-traditional, deserve to take up as much space as we want and
Right.
as we need, and to speak louder and to own our authority and to own our voices and to just be the boss bitches that we know to be. And to not let the male pale stale way of doing things continue to hold us back.
Yeah.
So as I was looking to establish Uproar and figure out who it was I wanted to support, it only felt natural to focus on this area, these people who we are all still looking around trying to find ways to be seen, to be heard, to have an impact, to have a legacy, and to not feel ashamed for being different.
Yeah.
And so that is what I have the joy and the privilege of doing every day.
I love it. It's fantastic. It leads so nicely to and beautifully into the next question. In a world that tempers the female instinct and
Yeah.
leadership style that are historically patriarchal, we see a lot of women doing that, right? That internalized patriarchy is real. We think we have to be a certain way, and usually it's acting like a man to lead. But how do you women, right? How do you help women discover and amplify their unique leadership style, like unabashedly? Because there's
Yeah.
so much deep-seated programming and social conditioning that has to be undone, I think, to get there. It's a lot.
I think it's important to acknowledge that every journey is different and everyone's secret sauce is going to, have its own flavor. So
Sure.
when I first meet with somebody, we start our time together by really exploring where they are and where they want to be. And I realize that's sort of the foundation of coaching. Where are you today? Where you want to be? And then our time together is spent getting through there. But I think it becomes obvious in those conversations really where someone is most proud of the things that set them apart. But those are oftentimes also the things that they have been taught or preconditioned to
Yes.
downplay or make beige. I have experienced this in my life. I know when you and I first connected, we talked about this too, right? This is the thing that makes me special. Oh no, that's the thing that threatens the way we've always done things. So we can't have that. Let's mentor you in a different direction. And it might look like unexpected ideas. It might look like nonlinear thinking and problem solving. It might look like how you support the people who report to you in the day to day, right? Are you a people first leader? It might be how your lived experiences or education, informs the way that you go about your day to day, right? My undergraduate degree is in musical theater. And I can't tell you how many times, how many interviews, how many conversations I've had where that has felt like my circus act, right? They're like, Kari's the theater person. Then it's like, am I supposed to act now?
Right.
What do you want me to do with that?
Yeah.
And that's just one item, one piece of who I am. And so I think really that in terms of discovering and amplifying your unique leadership style, it's really spending some time reflecting honestly about the things that make you different.
Yeah.
From a really objective point of view. Just plainly stating, this is the thing that I do. This is the box outside of which I live. And then figuring out how comfortable you are starting to lean more into that space instead of away from it, starting to find pride and confidence of owning the things that make you weird and then waving that freak flag a little bit more proudly. But I think something that I said that I really want to reiterate is that you have to feel safe doing that, right? If you are in an environment where it is really not safe for you for whatever reason to be yourself, that's a different conversation. Let's find you a place where you feel safer to bring as much of you as you are prepared to bring into all facets of your life every day.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think finding those spaces and places in which it's safe for us to kind of step into our full selves and almost in a way that feels like just a safe place to explore and experiment. I think that's what I
Hmm.
love about Together Digital and the community that we've established and created is I get to see a lot of these women who are coming into the digital space or are
Hmm.
trying to establish their thought leadership or leadership style. And, this is such a great place for them to kind of safely explore what that feels like, what that looks like. Because it's twofold, right? I think your story about how you came into coaching was interesting, is a lot of people kept saying, oh, go to Kari. You need support, you need advice, go to Kari. Like clearly you had a gift of wisdom and perspective that people found helpful. But the other side of it is too, is like authentically owning what it is that you do want to put out there into the world, right? Because that's the catch, is oftentimes,
Hmm.
especially women, we get rewarded for those things we're good at, right? Like organizing, taking notes, taking care of others. So those are the things that default to us. Don't assume that just because
Right.
other people are saying that's the thing you're good at, that that is the thing that is truly you. So I think that's what can get really
Hmm.
tricky, is we spend so much time trying to blend in that it almost feels weird,
Yes.
how, when, and where to stick out.
Oh gosh, that is so true. And I will say, I spent an extensive part of my career sort of putting on what I called business Kari, right?
Yeah.
Like that was the greatest acting performance of my life. I had a uniform
Yes.
of like business attire that I put on to go to work. And when I came home, I like took it was like taking off armor and then
Yep.
putting on the things that like made me feel good and made me feel like me. And like unwinding at the end of the day felt like such a relief,
Yep.
like that idea, we get there's that very like metaphorical idea of like coming home, but that was really it, right? Driving home from work or commuting home from work every day and knowing that like I could get through the door and I could put on the things that like just really spoke to me and not worry about what anybody else said or thought about it was just amazing. And I will say, it was exhausting. And
Yes.
people can tell when you are not actually being your full self. They
Mhm.
can't tell, they can't necessarily like pinpoint what it is, but they
Sure.
know that you are holding something back, and
Yeah.
that creates inauthentic connection. That creates not real or not intentional relationships. And
Mhm.
it wasn't until I was very, very ill in 2012. I had a big surgery. I was home recovering for 8 weeks. And during that 8 weeks, I literally was like, well, I just I time is too precious
Mhm.
and I can't keep giving away my energy to this thing that isn't serving me anymore. So
Yeah.
like I I cut off all my hair and I
Mhm.
started wearing a little bit more makeup, clothes that like looked well, I mean I was a little spicier makeup and like clothes that looked a little bit more like me, right? Like I still have a suit like in the closet and it's my like museum piece. But it's
Yeah.
like a charcoal gray suit with metallic pink pinstripe and I would
Nice.
wear it with these like vintage velvet pumps. And I thought I looked amazing and I felt
Sure you
strong and I
did.
felt good. And I
Yeah.
was still in business attire, but it felt more like me. And when I
Yep.
came through the door and I looked different and I was still behaving as I had behaved before with my
Yeah.
big ideas, with nonlinear thinking, a little bit less than expected, there was something about physically looking
Mhm.
different that made people either
Disconnect.
like they just got out of the way.
Mm.
I can't say that they were scared of me, but there was some wariness that came in with like, uh-oh, uh-oh. And my ability to get things done just skyrocketed because I
Yep.
wasn't hiding anymore.
Yes.
I wasn't hiding. And I think that's also why the draw came of have you talk to Kari, because people could observe that the
Mhm.
change that I allowed in myself
Mhm.
was bringing good things to me and they wanted to feel that same
Mm.
relief and release for themselves too.
I love it. That's great advice. That's great advice for just ways to explore and feel out and find your own uniqueness and to kind of see not just how you respond physically, like how you
Yeah.
your body, but also how others respond to you in environments to see like whether or not it's getting through. And
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, the multitude of masks that we wear, and I mean, my heart always goes out to even more marginalized groups of women,
Oh gosh.
especially the number of masks that you wear and the gears that you have to shift in a day can be so exhausting.
Hmm.
And, when you're not able to, or you don't feel safe to live authentically, in that space of yourself, and you've got to constantly be shifting gears between work and friends and coworkers and events and things like that. It just makes me tired thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's get back onto the topic a little bit of leadership.
Yes. Yeah.
We often hear about the importance of redefining leadership. What does that mean? What does leadership mean to you? And
Mm-hmm.
how can us individuals, those who are listening especially, start to shape our own definitions?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, for having been in business where I talked to non-traditional leaders and executives for several years, you were the second person only since 2020 who has asked me, what does leadership mean to me? So thanks for asking that question, because I love
Sure.
that question. Leadership means to me showing up every day, being present with integrity, with humility, with empathy, with honesty, with curiosity, and a healthy dose of adventure. Um, and I think that that can apply to not only like leading a team, but leading your life. And
Mhm.
so if you are thinking about how do I redefine or shape myself as a leader, I- all of those things that I mentioned are also values that are important to me. I mean, I would also throw in like kindness and play if I was to like really round out my
Yeah.
values chart. But I would invite you, if you were thinking about where do I start to define myself as a leader, really doing some good thinking about, well, what do you value?
Mhm.
What do you value in your life? What do you value in your relationships? What do you value at work?
Mhm.
Um, and how can you codify those values into a couple of words? And then do they apply to how you interact in a
Mhm.
more professional environment? And if
Yes.
values feels like a little too woo for you, you can
Mhm.
also always put together something like a purpose statement or a mission statement, right? We do that at work all the time, but how often are you putting together a mission statement for yourself? And
Yeah.
so an easy Mad Lib way to do that is to start with like, I, this is what I do
Mhm.
for this audience so that these outcomes, right?
Mhm.
So for Uproar, if I was to put together that purpose statement, and it's not only for Uproar, it is for me as a coach.
Mhm.
I offer safe spaces to
Mhm.
executive women and femmes, so that way they can amplify the things that make them different instead of hide them, and we
Mhm.
can wave their freak flags proud together,
Mhm. I
right?
love it.
So you can either start with some values to help identify your leadership style, or you can just give yourself a purpose statement. And I realize it seems very simple for me to be like, do this or this, but it really can be that simple.
It can. Yeah.
Um, and what you decide today doesn't
Mhm.
have to stick with you forever.
Right.
It can evolve. Your style will evolve as you have more experiences, as you engage with other people, as you grow and develop as an individual. And so you can come back and refine and redefine that as you yourself are growing.
I love it. That's great advice. Values, I think, are super important. I think we don't spend enough time reflecting on what those truly are. And
Yeah.
then giving a lot of that away, that power away to others. It also is a way that we overcommit ourselves to the things that don't serve us.
Mm,
Talking earlier about your story, realizing like where you were working and the work you were doing wasn't fulfilling. I know so many women who are out there at companies right now that feel that way. And a lot
yes.
of it's because not because they're out of alignment with the values necessarily at work, is that they don't even have any idea what their own true values are. And so by
Hmm.
sitting down and taking that time to reflect on what your values are, it'll give you the opportunity to create the boundaries that you need
Hmm.
to sort of say yes to the things that will serve your value, that's your purpose, and no to the things that really don't. And it's boundaries I know are hard for us, but values have been something that as a group, we've been on about quite a bit
Hmm.
because we've got a goal getters workshop that we do at the beginning of every year. And we actually help them. It speaks to all of those ambitious, goal driven women, but we kind of hit them, broadside them a little bit with this idea of let's talk about yourself when you're 80 and are at the end of your life. Like,
Ooh.
what do you want to be remembered for? What's your legacy? Those
Yes.
are some of your values. Now, let's talk about how we're going to set goals that are value based
Hmm.
versus should based or title based or salary based, because I mean, there's nothing wrong with having those kinds of goals, but just understand and know that they're not going to serve your purpose. They're not going to be the things at the end of the day that make you happy. And it's not going to be the thing they write on your headstone. You know?
No, it absolutely will not. And so often those types of goals are driven by external factors and not internal ones.
Exactly.
You are in service to somebody and not in service to yourself.
100%. And then you wonder why you can't get through it and finish that
Yeah.
goal. It's like, oh, you weren't even doing it for the right reasons to begin with.
Yeah. Or also, when you do it, you feel unfulfilled because it wasn't the right goal to begin with. And then you're left
Exactly.
with this weird, so what now?
Yeah, I felt that as soon as I hit my six-figure salary and my title at a certain point in agencies, I was like, wow, that was, I'm here. Now what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
how what am I working towards? Now what am I doing?
Yeah. Yeah. And then we stay places longer than we should for, I mean, anyway, that's a whole other
I
conversation.
know, right? Let's talk a little bit more about authenticity and leadership.
Yeah.
I know that you believe embracing authenticity is crucial in leadership. What advice do you have for someone who is looking to unapologetically be their authentic self in a leadership role? Because that can be pretty darn scary.
It can be. And like I said just a few minutes ago, I want you to feel safe doing this. So
Mhm.
I would say start small. And it's not always, I mean, I'm not asking you to like, if you are like a hell yes person and you are all in and you want to like dye your hair blue and start screaming from that, like do it. Do it. I am here. Like I will catch you. Let's go.
Right.
But if you need a little bit more support, I would say start small, step
Mhm.
by step, right? And so it can be as small as bringing forward a new idea that might be a little bit unpopular in a meeting.
Mhm.
It might even be, if you're worried about doing that in a larger space, find somebody to pre-socialize this idea with,
Yep.
get somebody on your side because it's much easier to be brave when you've got a partner in
Yeah.
crime or a co-conspirator than it
Mhm.
is when you're sort of out on that ledge by yourself.
Yep.
So I would say start with one idea, start with a spark. I would
Mhm.
also say your relationships can serve you in very different ways. And so I would invite you to start, it's such a corporate word, but like start
I know.
networking, start making friends
Mhm.
with people who you wouldn't necessarily interact with in the day to day.
Mhm.
Or reach out to folks if you feel so inclined, if you feel comfortable, or look for an introduction from somebody who knows them, who's doing things differently, or even in a different, they're in a different place, but maybe they're doing something similar to you. And share ideas and see where you can leverage each other's brilliance and expertise and
Yep.
then bring it back.
Mhm.
But I think finding this support and starting small and starting with one idea can be really, really helpful.
Mhm.
The second part of that, though, hmm, this is where it gets tricky, is not backing down.
Yeah. You have to do it.
So if you bring something forward and it feels controversial, you can't backpedal.
Right.
You will feel like you want to because it will feel easier to say, oh, no, you're right, never mind. Or, oh, sure, we can look at this in a year. Or, okay, yeah, I'll put together an exploratory team. But so often the right thing and the easy thing are
Mhm.
not the same thing.
No.
The right thing is holding to the integrity of your voice, of your style, and
Mhm.
pushing a little harder
Yeah.
and knowing that tomorrow it will get a little easier because leadership is a muscle that you exercise.
Mhm.
So you will get stronger and that will feel easier.
Right. What kind of advice do you have for those who want to be in the role of leadership more, but happen to be introverts? I think extroversion is a
Oh,
overly hyped leadership quality.
yeah.
What
So
are
I'm
your
an
thoughts
overcompensating introvert. So this is a question that is near and dear to my heart
on?
because I have observed across my career where my peers who are extroverts, it
Yeah.
just always seems like it's easier for them.
Mhm.
Right. It's there. I mean, I can be gregarious, but it takes a lot to like dig within me to go in a room and sort of shine that way.
Yeah.
Um, I have found that doing things more one-on-one and more in a way that I can plan for,
Mhm.
and then have downtime on the other side of it. So like hype up time, experience downtime. Um,
Yes.
is really, really helpful.
Mhm.
Um, because then I mean, I'm also a Virgo, so I'm a little bit controlling, but like it helps me
Yeah.
control more of the elements and then honor my energy and my
Yeah.
working style. And so I
Mhm.
think when we talk about leadership style, it doesn't need to be in conflict with how you like to get things done. In
Yes.
fact, I think how you lead can further expand
Mhm.
how you do things. It just sort of brings it to an elevated level, right? You get to sort of set the beat
Yep.
by which everybody else begins to
Mhm.
dance, groove.
Yeah. And you're modeling if you're kind of living in that authentic space where you're leading in the way that suits you best authentically and you're not forcing it,
Right.
you're being an example, you're modeling for others that this is possible, that there is
Yes.
another way, that there are a multitude of leadership styles out there, that a lot of science is even proving are more productive for
Hmm.
the bottom line, for retention, for employee satisfaction, for customer
Hmm.
satisfaction, than what we've seen. But I do know that, I mean, that's just a common thing with, again, being a bit of a personal development junkie. I've learned over the years that I come off very much as an extrovert, but I'm very much an ambivert. And then when I do Myers-Briggs, I'm an introvert.
Yes.
And but it's really because I think a lot of the time, well, one, I was always a talker, so
Hmm.
I'm a verbal processor, but that doesn't necessarily make me an extrovert. I'm
Mm-mm.
just a verbal processor. So learning and distinguishing those differences for me have been really helpful. And I think this is where, any kind of self-awareness practices you can do or personal development is a good tool and a good way to start to figure out what is your authentic leadership style, because you're going to find strength in
Yes.
the ability to leverage those unique, kind of ways in which you do work well, and you can find yourself working better and well with others. So it's not to say that your introversion is a minus, it is a plus, because you are using your ears more than your mouth, which is honestly what a lot of leaders need to be
Yes.
doing.
Yes. Yes. And I have seen some of the most impactful leaders that I have observed, and some people, I mean, are the people who they say, I need to think about it. They say,
Yes.
I don't know, but I'm going to get back to you. They
Yes.
bring the people along with them from their team who have the answers. So that way they are not standing in independence from the people who they lead. They are standing behind the expertise and the brilliance of the people who are
Yes.
supporting their work in the day to day and giving them an opportunity to shine. And I think that that is
Mhm.
beautiful because it supports how you are perhaps um how you best work as an introvert. It gives other people an opportunity to grow and shine. And it demonstrates that leaders don't have to be the person. It's like the pyramid is upside down, right? They are not at the top, they are at the bottom.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love that perspective. I love flipping things around like that.
Yes.
And I also loved your advice, just to make sure it isn't lost on anyone who's listening, who's still kind of struggling to find their voice and to speak up, is finding champions. I loved your idea of pre-socializing the idea. Maybe they could be in the room with you. That way, again, if you get mansplained or there's some
Yes.
going on where a guy explains your idea that you just shared, and it could be another man, it's cool. We can leverage our allies, but have someone else there to kind of reinforce your voice for a time, I think. But what you'll find, at least in my experience, what I found, especially kind of once I hit that niche and understanding of just the extreme disparities for women, I was super privileged in my career. I went
Mm-hmm.
from copywriter to creative director in like not even 5 years. And it
Mm-hmm.
was because I had a lot of amazing male allies and champions. I was also childless for most of those years. And it wasn't until I started having kids and got up to a certain level in my career that I started to feel very isolated, and attended the 3% conference, which denoted the fact that only 3% of creative directors were women, which blew my mind. I was like, what? How did I not even know this? But then I look around me and I'm like, oh, yeah, this makes sense. It's
Yeah.
closer to 12 to 15%, which is great, but still obviously a very long way to go.
Yeah.
Um, but I would say don't wait for permission necessarily. Nobody's going to give you permission to start using your voice and leading. Like, you really just have to
Mm-mm.
find that internal resolve and reason and values, like you said earlier, and purpose to start to do that. And it's scary as shit at first, but then the outcome is afterwards, you actually feel pretty damn good
Mm-hmm.
about what you just did, because you stepped into your truth, you spoke it, people heard it, and they're like, light bulb. And
Yes.
even if everybody in the room agrees and that everybody in the room likes, somebody else, I promise you, in that room is thinking the same thing and thinking, my God, I'm glad she said that.
Yes. And it's going to get out.
Yeah.
Other people are going to start. I mean, it happened with me. I've seen it happen with other people. People are going to start coming to talk to you about their ideas. And then you can become that ally, that champion for them.
Love it.
Particularly, I have found with folks who are on their way up, right? They are looking for a mentor. They are looking for advice. They are looking for somebody to soundboard against. And when they see that you are willing to do things differently,
Yeah.
uh, maybe that you are starting to identify yourself a bit more as like a misfit or whatever that looks like, right? Um, you're going to draw them to you. They will find you, and then it will become easier because you'll have your people, you will have your
Yes.
community. Yeah.
You attract when you project your values and your perspective on the world, that you get surrounded by more of the kinds of people that you are in alignment with. Um,
Yes.
I am totally a product of that.
Yeah.
So I get it. I get it. I wouldn't be sitting here doing this podcast right now if I wouldn't have started talking about it more. Because again, it wasn't even necessarily impacting me per se, but I mean, I still needed it.
Mm,
I became a member of Together Digital first, and then, CEO and bought the company later down the line. But none of it would have been if it wouldn't have been for me just getting a little pissed off and being open and talking about it and sharing the data with my male coworkers and saying, how can we work together to make this a more equitable place, and a safe space for our women
yeah.
to work? You'll be surprised what comes your way when you start to live in your truth.
It's funny that you say that too, that, you got pissed off. I have a client who, uh, was the only I'm trying to think about how much I can tell without giving away
Sure.
confidentiality, because confidentiality is very
Yeah.
important to me. But she was the only female partner at a very high powered law firm
Mhm.
um, in a healthcare arena. And she saw some opportunities come and go that
Mhm.
were not, and she raised her hand for them. She spoke out about them, and they just like, oh, nothing ever came her way. And how about that? And it wasn't the right time. Or, oh, well, you were away with her, one of her
Yep.
kids had a play. I mean, it's a whole thing. So she started to operate out of what she called revenge.
Yeah.
She didn't get mad. She got revenge. Like, she started working in a way to just show them, but not only show them, because it wasn't only about them. She was doing it for herself, to really demonstrate to herself that she had earned the things that she was raising her hand for, that she was ready for it, that she had the idea, that she could do it well. And she operated out of revenge and got a whole lot of stuff done
Yeah.
and made a whole lot of impact,
Uh-huh.
and then was scooped up by a different law firm to do incredible work because she just started, her pissed off was getting
Love it.
even.
Yeah, I love it.
I
That's
do too.
amazing.
Yeah.
Mean, I think it's another thing from a social conditioning standpoint. We as women are taught not to be angry.
Mm.
And we don't often know how to leverage or express our anger. And if you're into Enneagrams, I'm an Enneagram type 9. So
Mm.
don't really do well with conflict and anger, but I have definitely learned that it can be a tremendous motivator, especially when there's some sense of justice involved. Thank
Sure,
you, my
sure.
wing. But yeah, I love that story. I'm kind of curious on that note too. What are some common challenges that women and femme leaders face in their leadership journeys,
Mm.
and how can they start to overcome them? Because the one you just explained sort of touched a little bit on motherhood, so I want to call it one of the obvious ones: mom guilt.
Mm.
How many women have stood up at events or in one-on-ones with me and have said, I just don't feel like I can be ambitious and be a good mom.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of those, and then other roadblocks that
Yeah,
people
so
run
like
into?
the evil trifecta that I come into contact with most often are imposter syndrome,
Mm.
perfectionism,
Yeah.
which I think is where some of the mom guilt comes in. Like, if I can't do everything and I
Yeah.
can't do everything well, then
Hmm.
what am I doing? Have I failed?
Yeah.
And burnout.
Yeah.
And we talked like a little bit about burnout a while back, right here, in terms of like sticking around in something for too long.
Yeah.
Um, but those are the three, right? And so when we think about like how to overcome imposter syndrome. Like if I had the silver bullet to this, I would be a gajillionaire.
Right.
Here's what
Yeah.
I have seen that works, right? Because you might see places, you could read a bunch of articles. It's like, first of all, let's stop calling it imposter syndrome, which I'm there for, but also
Yeah.
it's like find your community. And like, yes, find your community. But I also think that because we know we are preconditioned to do a little bit of catastrophizing, and because we are preconditioned to self-doubt in those moments when something incredible is coming our way.
Mhm.
Imposter syndrome happens when you are pushing against your comfort zone,
Yeah.
when you are ready to grow, and
Mhm.
then your brain and your heart go up, 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 up. No, nope, nope. It's going to be hard. It's going to be scary. People aren't going to judge us. I don't think we can do it, so we're not going to do it.
Right.
Um, I invite you in moments when you feel strong, when you are feeling like you are firing on all cylinders and the day is shining and nothing can get you down, to spend a couple of moments reflecting on that big feeling and
Mm.
why you are feeling like you are untouchable,
Mhm.
and spend a couple of minutes thinking about the opportunities or the challenges that might present themselves to you in the next month or 3 months or 6 months or however far you want to go. So that
Mhm.
way, when you are feeling strong, you can mentally prepare for them. So in those moments when you are feeling a little less than strong,
Mhm.
past you has done the hard work to prep you for
Yeah.
being ready for that moment, right?
Mhm.
So I'm not saying wallow. I'm
Yeah.
not suggesting that you like doomsday scenario prep
Right.
for your life, but give yourself the gift when you are feeling strong of preparing to take care of yourself when you are
Mhm.
not going to feel that strong.
Mhm.
That's what I would say about imposter
Love that.
phenomenon.
And I think something there really quickly before you move on to
Yeah.
the perfectionism and burnout with imposter syndrome too, I've kind of always taken it oddly as a good sign. Like, and you started to
Mm.
touch on that. I really just try to accept and allow the moment, but not let it slow me down and stop me. Because really, to me, imposter syndrome is just all the bullshit the rest of the world has fed you that tells
Yeah.
you you're not meant to be here, you don't deserve it, this isn't the space for you. And that
Yeah.
means you're pushing up against something. That means you are actually in, like you said, breaking out of your comfort zone in
Yeah.
order to achieve any kind of growth or satisfaction or a sense of purpose or to beat burnout. Like, you need to be in that space more often. And
Hmm.
sometimes that means being a little uncomfortable. And I think there's also nothing wrong with a little like healthy dose of a lack of ego, because I think sometimes too, like if we have no imposter syndrome, you sound like an asshole to me. Like, everybody should be checking in on themselves just a little bit. But I
Yes.
also encourage women and people of color, especially anybody who's marginalized, to kind of step into and hold space for that feeling and know that it's not you. It's
Hmm.
literally all the messages you've received throughout your entire existence telling you that you're not supposed to be here. And like you said, get mad and get revenge on that.
Yeah.
Like, go for it anyways.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you're like, I call it my imposter inner voice, right? If my
Yeah.
imposter inner voice starts to like push play on my but what if mixtape, that's
Yep.
gonna keep me back in my like squishy comfortable place. It means
Yeah.
I'm on the right track. It means
Yeah.
something great is on the other side of that feeling. I just need to
Yes.
push a little harder into it. I just need to lean a little
Agree.
bit more. And I think perfectionism really sort of fuels that, right? This idea like if I can't do it right, if I can't be great right out of the gate, then I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know why fail has become a bad four-letter word. But I think that um, we have lost track, particularly women in leadership roles and particularly women in male dominated arenas.
Mm.
There is this external pressure that if you were going to do something, you you better do it right and it better be perfect and it better be polished, because if it's wrong, you're going to set all of us back, right? Or like somebody's going to judge you for it. And because of that, we've lost a lot of sense of exploration and play and like failing fast and picking up and rebounding and learning from what didn't go well and then like trying again.
Yes.
So I think if we want to, and I am on a journey to overcome perfectionism, right? Like this is a lifelong study that I am on.
Mhm.
I think that if we want to overcome perfectionism, we have to let ourselves off the hook, and and this is where this idea of like spirit of adventure comes back in,
Mhm.
right? You need to get lost in order to figure out the way through.
Mhm. I love it. I would also recommend self-compassion. I was actually listening to a podcast last night on my long drive home with my spare tires. We were talking before we started recording.
Yes.
I listened to a podcast with Kristen Neff. I don't know if many of you have listened to her, but she's a great psychologist, and I think she's a professor. I can't think of what university right now, but she talked a lot about self-compassion in everything that she writes. And I think that is something that, nobody is harder on us than us. And really learning to kind of work on that self-critic will help with imposter syndrome and with perfectionism. And it starts with self-compassion and the fact that we probably speak to ourselves in ways we would never speak to even our worst enemies.
Yeah.
So being aware of what kind of conversations we're having with ourselves on a day-to-day basis, such an important thing. Self-compassion. I'm trying to figure out ways to like even bake it into like my morning practice and then right before bed. Cause I tell you, I wake up and I roll out of bed and the thoughts start right away.
Yes. Yeah. No, there's an exercise that I do with my clients where I invite you to like get a notebook or have a Google Doc or whatever open on your computer. Yeah. And whatever you say to yourself during the day, write it down.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, and it's very easy journaling, because at the end of the day, you can look back and you can see like, oh, I wasn't particularly nice to my friend Kari today.
Yeah.
Or, oh, Kari was really rad today. And look at her. Like she's popping herself up. She's saying, keep going. I mean, I even noticed this. I begrudgingly run for exercise.
Yeah.
And there are definitely moments where I'm like, keep going.
Right?
You can do this up the hill. You made it up the hill. Like, it's just like
Rocky moment.
How you would pep talk yourself in those low moments. Like keep track of them for a day.
Yeah.
And just see how much you are celebrating yourself versus how much you are holding yourself down.
Right.
And then try again tomorrow.
I love it. That's a great practice. I'm going to have to take that up and see what comes of it. All right. I got a few more questions, but then we also have time at the end for questions from our live listening audience. If any of you have questions, the time has flown. I just looked down at my phone. Holy crap. How is it 10 till already?
Oh gosh. Yeah.
All right. But I have a couple of last questions for you, and then I'll keep an eye on the chat in case anybody happens to drop a question. In the meantime, there's plenty of links up above in the chat earlier, and they'll also be included in the show notes on how you can connect with Kari, follow Kari on social, all that good stuff. All right. I have to be choosy about my last few questions because we're close to time. Oh my goodness. Let's talk about this change management.
Oh yeah.
For those who are maybe in that space, having to go through it or experiencing it or facilitating it, it's pretty daunting. Could you share some strategies or insights for navigating personal or organizational transformations effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. So you were absolutely right. We have been preconditioned to believe that change has to be hard and change has to be scary. And I reject that. And maybe that's a little bit maverick of me, but that helps me sort of go through the day and be able to influence change before it disrupts me. And so I would love for everybody to sort of embrace that mindset. You have the ability to disrupt change before it disrupts or overturns your life. Yes. And so there are like 6 things that when I'm either working in consultation with a company doing change management, or like something is happening in my world and I need to adapt to it just on a personal level, there are 6 things that I sort of go through. And the first one is really understanding what the change is, and is it bringing some challenge that I need to overcome or some opportunity that I need to be prepared for or open to, because change isn't always bad. It really isn't always bad. In fact, some changes are beautiful and magical. And so we just think about them in different ways. So first and foremost is really spending some time understanding what the change is at its core. The second thing would be like, what evidence do we have? What proof do we have that there is a problem that needs to be solved, or that there is something else that we need to be poised for, right? That is going to be that spark of inspiration or ignition for something good to come. What evidence or proof do we have that this change that we're dreading is actually going to happen?
Right? Yeah.
And
catastrophize, don't we?
Data. Yeah. Is there data to support that? Right. The third item on that list is really like, what do we expect to happen because of this change? What are the outcomes? What are the impacts? Who's going to be impacted? When are they going to impact it? Is it like we have to physically move people to a new building? Is it introducing a new system? Is it just I am getting a new washing machine and I'm not going to know how to use it? Is it that um what is another reason? Oh, we're backyard beekeepers. So is it that like our bee colony grew so quickly that now we need to split the hive? And like that's wonderful. But so like that's a different stress, but it's wonderful. So what are the outcomes? What are the impacts? And when might they arrive? And when we're talking about when might they arrive, we also want to keep in mind like timing. Timing is number 4, right? So when is this change going to happen? Why is this change happening then? Does it have to happen then? Does it all have to happen then?
Yeah.
Sort of like wrap our hands around the timing of it and the
Mhm.
timeline of it.
Cool.
The next item is what are other things that are like relying on that change, right? Is there something else that we've done that has now brought about this change, or is this change going to do something else? I don't know. And then finally, support. You are never in it alone. Even if you feel like you were in it alone, you do not have to be lonely. So who
Yes.
can you collaborate with? Who can you delegate to? Who can you talk about this with? Where can you find support or therapy or consult or counseling
Yeah.
when you're going through this? Those are the 6 items that really
I love
help
it.
me sort of position and respond to instead of react to change, and then
Yes.
position myself and my plans so that way I am driving the change isn't driving me.
I love it. That's fantastic. And you said you have something like you have that kind of outlined in a
Oh yeah,
PDF.
I have like a little cheat sheet. You want it? I'll send it to
Awesome.
you.
Yeah,
And you can
yeah. We're
share it with
gonna
everybody.
share it with the group because I think it's such a it's a fan. I love frameworks. I love things where you can kind of sit, like you said, and really I like to compartmentalize, especially when there's a
Mm.
lot happening and changing. I do get very excited and happy about the possibility of change. I am also an infinite optimist and
Sure.
hopeful. So, but at the same time, it doesn't make it less necessarily overwhelming. It's just like you said, it's in a different way. I'm very
Mhm.
jealous that you're beekeepers, by the way. Um, I've always wanted to do that. But in that instance, I think it's just really great to have something to sit down with, either for yourself or even to share with others to help work through that process. Like you said earlier, too, great leaders bring people along with them. And I think that's something we forget about as leaders as we're making change is like we're so caught up in the mess and what has to be done in our own heads that we don't often think, oh, I need to stop and articulate this, what's
Mhm.
happening, why it's happening, how it's happening, what's the timeline to everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it sounds like a great tool. I appreciate you sharing that. Okay, I'm going to ask one more question and then we're going to wrap it up, although I feel like we can keep going.
I could.
Oh, which one do I want to ask? Um, I'm going to ask the kind of most interesting one, in my opinion, of the few that I have left, because I think it might be helpful for our listeners. I don't think we did not get any
I didn't
questions,
see.
but some nice comments. So let's see. A true crime and rescue dogs sound like, obviously, and I relate to those deeply.
Yeah.
How do these passions tie into your coaching approach? Because I think that's an important thing as we're talking about living authentically and owning who you are. How do we begin to bring that into our professional selves?
Yeah. So those are 2 wildly different things that don't seem like they really align with a coaching field, but they do, in fact, because the thing that I am most interested in true crime is twofold. The first one is like what makes people tick? What motivates people to do the things that they do? Is it really something that is sort of like at their core, something that makes them, make choices that have very negative impacts on people around them and have horrifying consequences, or what makes somebody snap? I'm really interested in those motivators, but at the same time, and more importantly, I'm interested in the survivors and
Mhm.
how you move on after. How do you let an experience that extraordinary inform you, but not define you? I think so often when we are going about our day to day, particularly if we are trying to establish ourselves as leaders in a different way, if we are feeling different, there's a sense of like, if I do this thing, then this is what I'm always going to have to do, as opposed to, no, this is the ignition point for some magical glitter bomb explosion
Yeah.
that's your legacy going forward, right? So what motivates you? How do you understand those motivators? How do you understand how to influence motivators and other people?
Yeah.
And then how do you move on? How do you move beyond past
Mhm.
experiences that have perhaps
Yes.
been hard? and reclaim control of the good and the joy and the passion to move forward. In
Mhm.
terms of rescue dogs, right? We most recently have found ourselves supporting rescues that have pit bull breed dogs, and we have two pit mixes, and they are they're goofballs and they're lovely and they think that they're people and they are little glitter bombs. And pit bull breed dogs are often very misunderstood and people fear them or they're wary of them because we only hear the bad things about them.
Yep.
And the folks that I often support are misfits. They are feared or people are made wary of them for whatever reasons. And these dogs, rescue dog in general, right? They cannot help but be themselves.
Mhm.
And we love them and we take care of them and we support them and we nurture them to be their best selves. And that is where coaching really comes into play,
Yeah.
right? Supporting people to be their best, their truest, their most colorful self. So that's how those two
Love it.
things
I
align
think
back to
I
coaching.
love it. Well, and that's such a good exercise for everyone who's listening. Like, take a moment this weekend and reflect on those things that are your passions and hobbies outside of the work that you do and figure out how does it align to either the work that I'm currently doing or the kind of work that I actually want to be doing.
Mm,
Like, what's this tendency? Oh, I have this nurture tendency. I have this tendency to want to understand how people are motivated. I like to see people be their best selves. It's like, oh, you sound like a coach.
yeah.
Surprise.
Yeah.
So I love this conversation, Kari. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here and sharing your authentic self and everything that you've done to help empower other women to step into their own authentic power. And
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity. And I would love to continue the conversation.
yes, absolutely. Yes, let's
Super.
keep in touch. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's been a great conversation. As always, Kari, it goes way too fast, but we'll talk soon. Until then, keep asking, keep giving, and keep growing.